مرسی. سلام، من سهیلای شفایی هستم و از طرف کانون ایرانیان باستون کمیته فرهنگی به شما خوش آمد میگویم. دو دوست عزیزم، مهندس مرتضی طیرانی که در قبل چندین سال پیش ریاست کانون رو داشتن و آقای وزیر سیویل انجینیر و آقای مهندس رضا اکبرپور که ریاست کنونی کانون رو دارن، تشکر میکنم که در این برنامه به من کمک کردن. آقای طیرانی در قسمت Q&A و آقای اکبرپور در قسمت تکنیکال. واقعا از هر دوتون تشکر میکنم. این برنامه مجازی ضبط میشه و اگر مایل نیستید میتونید دوربین‌های خودتون رو ببندین و از طریق چت با ما در تماس باشین. این برنامه به زبان انگلیسی برگزار خواهد شد به درخواست آقای نادر اردلان. همونطور که میدونید کانون ایرانیان باستون در سال 1989 به عنوان یک سازمان غیر انتفاعی که موضع سیاسی و مذهبی نداشته باشه به ثبت رسید. اینجا موقعیت را غنیمت میدونم که از آقای حبیب لاجوردی که اولین رئیس کانون ایرانیان باستون بودن یادی بکنیم. ایشان در واشنگتن دی سی زندگی میکنن و به دلایل شخصی نتونستن با ما امشب باشن، ولی باعث افتخار و خوشحالی من هست که با دو فرزند نازنینشون لیلا و مکس امشب با ما هستن و در گرد ما هستن. بعد از این که ما با آقای اردلان راجع به متن و تم برنامه امشب صحبتی کردیم، در صدد این بودیم که با چند پروفسور از دانشگاه ICMS ایران سنتر منیجمنت استادیز هاروارد که ببینیم آیا میتونیم چند پروفسور یا چند تا از دانشجوهای اونجا رو در تماس باشیم و در این برنامه شرکت بکنن. از خانم اقبال علوی سلطانی نهایت تشکر دارم اقبال جون که این محبت رو کردی، منو در تماس گذاشتی با پروفسور کسرجیان که خوشحالم که امشب اینجا هستین، پروفسور کسرای فردوست و چندین آلومنای، آقای فرهاد کاشانی good to see you، آقای محمود البرزی، فرامرز فرنام، فریده رفیعی، منظر عطابکی، کامبیز نفیسی و لیلی امامی دانشجوانی بودن که امشب دور هم هستیم و واقعا اقبال جون بدون همت شما من نمیتونستم ریچارد کنم با این اشخاص و مخصوصا دو تا از پروفسورهای تاپ کالیبر پروفسور ICMS. بازم ممنون از شما. و مهمان امشبمون آقای نادر اردلان. ایشون شخصی والا با عشق ایران، با محبت به خانه و خانواده، معمار، شهرساز، محقق و نویسنده که در زمینه معماری اقلیمی ایران در رتبه بالایی قرار دارند. مرسی که دعوت کانون ایرانیان رو قبول کردین و امشب ما ستوری تلینگی از زبان آقای نادر اردلان میشنویم. ایشان و خانومشون شهلا گنجی اردلان سالیان درازی همیار کانون بودن، چه از دور چه از نزدیک، و واقعا به دوستیشون و عشقشون به ایران افتخار میکنم. و حالا راجع به آقای اردلان که اغلبتون ایشون رو بیشتر از من شاید بشناسین. ایشون در سال 1939 به دنیا آمدن، در تهران لیسانس خودشون رو از کارنگی ملون گرفتن و فوق لیسانسشون رو از هاروارد یونیورسیتی در مستر آف آرشیتکچر. در سال 1964 به ایران برگشتن و به ریاست بخش معماری شرکت نفت مشغول به کار شدن. تفکرات آقای نادر اردلان بر این بود که فرهنگ ایرانی رو در معماری خود ادغام بدن. موزه هنری معاصر تهران که توسط کامران دیبا طرح شده بود با همکاری بی نهایتی از آقای اردلان به تمام رسید. و چند آثار کوتاهی رو براتون میگم جزو کارهایی که ایشون در زندگیشون کردن. دانشگاه بوعلی سینا در همدان، مرکز مطالعات دانشگاه هاروارد، همین ICMS که امشب تاپیک ما هست، تاپیک آقای اردلان هست، شهر نوران، موزه فرش تهران که میدونم خیلی از شما بازدید کردین، طراحی ورزشگاه آزادی که چند تا مسابقه دیدین حتما در اونجا، شهرک صنعتی بهشهر، مشارکت در طراحی 2 برج سامان، برج هوشمند قطر، اسکله تجاری الشرق کویت، سیتیزن بانک رودایلند و چندین ساختمان و بانک هایی که در امریکا ساخته شده. و ایشون واقعا صوفی هستن و مسلک صوفیشون هم در خیلی از کتاباشون رو شما میبینید. 3 تا کتاب نوشتن: حسن وحدت که نقش سنت در معماری ایرانی است، منشور حقوق اسکان و طراحی با طبیعت. صحبتم رو کوتاه میکنم تا بعد از مهمونهای دیگه که در این پروژه با آقای نادر اردلان سهیم بودن، چه در قسمت منیجمنت ICMS، چه پروفسور و چه دانش آموزان، و پشن آقای حبیب لاجوردی و طراحی نادر اردلان بود که ICMS به وجود اومد و کالیبرای مثل فرشاد کاشانی و اشخاص زیادی که اسم بردم و از اونجا گریجویت شدن. در هر صورت دوباره تشکر میکنم که دعوت کانون رو قبول کردین نادر جان.
Well, good evening, everyone. My deep appreciation to IAB and to dear Sohaila Khanum for this invitation. It's really a pleasure to actually see all of you who I remember so vividly from when we were slightly younger. And I have to express appreciation to Professor Kasarjan because his contributions by, first of all, in the beginning, of how we created the program for the school, but for this evening, so many memories he brought to me by his emails and photos that he sent, and to Iqbal Alavi, similarly, I have really been refreshed by seeing photos of ICMS from childhood until the last sort of days of its actual existence. But as you will see this evening, ICMS still is alive, and I will share with you where it is as we go through this story. So now please relax, sit back. I'm going to tell you a short story via the Shahr Farang metaphor. And it begins with going back to 1945. Can you imagine that? Go back 75 years or so. Iran, occupied Iran, Russians to the north, British to the south, in firm control of the oil, and Americans in Tehran. And on Meydan Akakh, in a small courtyard house with a little hose and a persimmon tree, mother allows my Lale to take me to the street where a Shara Farang is about to be shown. My first view of the outside world before then, in 1947, that all the family came to America. So put a big black cloth over your head while I tell you this story via the Shara Farang of the ICMS. I'm going to share a screen. خب یکی بود یکی نبود. And on the screen, as you all may remember, the Shara Farang has 3 portals. And on the left-hand side, because from children, we're all taught the myth of Jamshid. And we're also taught a most important aspect, probably the kernel of, I would say, the bright light of being an Iranian, and that is the idea, the auspiciousness of far, of divine glory and honor, of honor. And on the right-hand side, some of you may not see all this because of the little pictures on the screen, but there's a little boy on a bicycle. But really, what I want to address is the astonishment on this boy's face. This is the astonishment of the growth of consciousness. And so this story really begins from childhood. But wait a minute, we've talked about the left, we've talked about the right. What's in the center? Well, in the center is the logo of ICMS. This was created with Habib and myself. And later on, if we have time, I'd love to give the explanation of what that meant. Just think of really two motions, in and out, in and out. But the story is about Iran Center for Management Studies in association with Harvard University Business School from Tehran, Iran in 1972 to 1981. And I happen to be thrilled to have been involved with this adventure. Well, this adventure really centers around Habib Ladjevardi, the ICMS founder. Of course, I knew Habib probably from the age of 9 or 10. We were all growing up in Westchester County, New York. And then later on, as we grew, Habib came to study at business school. I came to Harvard at graduate school. And in 63, Habib returned to Iran. I, in 64, followed him. And really then this is a story of the dialogues and discussions, also with Reza Alabi coming back also from Harvard. How can we be of consequence in Iran? How can we contribute? Okay, in 1980, the Agha Khan Award came into being. This is the most outstanding architectural award at that time that existed. It gave $500,000 every 3 years. I happened to be on the steering committee of this, but it wasn't necessarily because of that the idea of the Iran Center for Management Studies, really from the time that it really got started, became of great interest to Harvard because of many reasons. How can an American curriculum be brought to Iran and be built in brick, in traditional Kashani brick? So this first report was a case study by Markev and I, by JB and I, that we presented at Harvard MIT Agha Khan program. And it has continued. It has been a very lasting, all the records of our school, its pictures, its plans, etc., are stored in the Agha Khan Award. But because I had been a steering committee, this project could not be nominated. It would be conflict of interest. So in 1989, when my term was up, a investigation group with writing a report, such as you see the first pages, came to Tehran to investigate what is this project called ICMS. And there you see on top, Iran Center for Management Studies. And in 1989, it had already become Imam Jafar Sadiq University, different curriculum, different people, but it was still there in Van Eyck Parkway in Tehran. I was the partner in charge of design, and Habib represented the ICMS Board of Trustees. But please note on the bottom of this page, they wanted to know who were the master craftsmen. And we were thrilled to write that the master craftsman was Haji Pur Ashraf, master mill worker. He did all the woodwork with chube jangali that he had dried and kept for us. But listen to this guy, Mohammad Kajani. He was a Baghbun that Habib introduced. He was our master gardener because we were going to do a Bagh-E-Fin as the theme of ICMS. So we really needed to do a garden that would be truly Iranian. Quickly, I was at that time a partner of Abdulaziz Farmarian, and so I brought this project as a project. It was sort of not well taken because it was a small project. Everybody said, oh, we'll lose money. But this wasn't the case. This was a unique experiment. Later on, when I created my own firm in 72, at my firm, Mandala Collaborative, we did the second phase. Just for you to know, the structural engineer was a Harvard graduate, Zare Gregorian, the late Zare Gregorian. All the furnishings were done by our friend Mohammad Daraghi. The gateway plaster murals were done by our friend Masoud Arabshahi. And the contractors, first phase, Shaigan Construction, Daryush's family at that time, Mehdi Larizadeh for mechanical, and a general contractor for second phase, Melli Sakhtaman, my cousin Majid, God rest his soul. Going very quickly, the buildings were done very quickly. Just to give you the hint, we built for first phase 6,000 square meters on 80 hectares of land. It cost $1 million. And if I translate this into feet, dollars per square foot, it was $15 a square foot, unheard of in Iran. And mainly it was because we said from the very beginning, all local materials, all local craftsmen, all the construction will be done by Iranians. And so that was a wonderful way to do what I think really is a genuine piece of investigation about how can we build things from our own traditions and still be able to serve a Harvard Business School need. All the funds also came from Iran, 50% from private sources, 50% from, I think, the Ministry of Higher Education. Okay, so talking about money, where did Iran's money come from? Well, in 1908, in a far off place called Masjid Suleiman, the British hit oil. And this in time, in 1965, as part of the Iranization of the oil industry, NIOC said that all non-basic services would be transferred from the British and the consortium to professional staff. And so throughout the world, NIOC recruited recent graduates. 40 of us were brought to Masjid Suleiman. On the front right seated is yours truly. And the person with the mustache and the pipe and the white box is a wonderful gentleman, Mr. Yunsen, whom I replaced. And so the Iranization of Iran began with this group of people living in the wilderness, really, of Masjid Suleiman, with night flares blowing terrible noxious gas into the air, and you thought you were living in hell. But it was where we survived. Where did we survive? Masjid Suleiman, here you see on top right, is this beautiful cyclopean stone, precursor to Takht Jamshid, first built here. In fact, the whole idea of how oil was discovered, Darcy was going around and asking the Bakhtiaris, who mainly lived in this area, where is the sacred fire? And the sacred fire, by Kali, was gas overlaying oil. And that's where the eternal flames were. And that's how this place was discovered. The reason I bring this up, because in the 2 years I was there, a very incredible man, Roman Gershman, one of the outstanding archaeologists, French archaeologists, was doing the archaeological surveys of Masjid Suleiman and Bard Nishandi and others. And I was asked if I could do his drawings of his finds. This is how I got involved with Iranian history, architecture, and the appreciation that world history gives to what we built in the past and what we have continually more or less built. And the question is, will we be building anything today in Iran? Or did we build anything of value in Iran in the heydays of when we were there in the 70s? And so that would be worthy of archaeological distinction when people look back and say, this is that particular civilization, 1945's on. So this is a question. But this question got me to journey throughout all of Iran. And really, I did this with the purpose of trying to, for myself, find my own cultural identity. And I first started by going to Tehran University and offering my own free service for 3 years if I could be given the responsibility of taking young students on weekends to all the major traditional cities of Iran. And we would draw the buildings. And in that place, in the evenings, we would then discuss what we had drawn. And that was, for these youngsters, an eye-opener, because at that time, Tehran University has switched from the French school, the École des Beaux-Arts school, to more or less the American, Italian, European style. And everybody was into the modern international style of architecture. But we were trying to look at the roots of our own architecture. And this was really important because for me, anyway, I learned something about the language of traditional Persian architecture. So I'll just spend a few moments. I believe that, first of all, we believe in space, not shape. We're an inward-looking people, inward to what lies as a treasure within us. And it's the garden. It's this spring of life that comes from a fountain. And it's very different from a positive shape-oriented people who build acropolises on the hilltop. Also, this business of space has very special linkage. It has a connection, it has a transition, it has a culmination into this courtyard or Bagh space. And it's very much the part of the grammar, mathematics, geometry, nature, man, paradise garden, and transcendent symbols. Out of this, for me, I felt there was a language that I then wanted to experiment when Habib asked that I would design the Harvard Business School. I said, Habib, I'll only accept to do it if I could test what I had researched as the language of Persian architecture. And I think it's based on the use of sakal, takht, takht Suleiman, takht Jamshid, the stair, the courtyard, hayat or bagh, gateway, porch, Avon, integrated space. This is a unique piece of Iranian architecture called chartaq. It begins with where the fire of the Zoroastrian was placed at the center of that chartaq. And this chartaq is a place of sacred space. So even today, when you go to visit Masjid al-Jami in Esfahan, it was originally a chartaq, but the point of sacredness moved from the center where the fire was, and it became the mihrab. The space became the important item of sacred space. And of course, the top. Okay. I must say that I quickly put it into a design philosophy. I felt that there were 4 principles of relevant design. And this is really showing something that carried me for many years. It has now developed into far more complex, far more detailed study, but really it was purposeful function, environmental adaptation, relevant to our cultural heritage, and adaptive technology. Okay, the land. Habib looked for land. Habib went to the ministry and he was offered 4 sites. He chose the Vanak site that you see here in outline of Tehran in the 1970s. And of course, it grew with the great Tehran master plan to be more or less now very pivotally involved on the Vanak road up to Shemran. And on that red spot, I designed this hilltop paradise garden that you see here in the center, a fount where the highest point I placed the storage of water, and we irrigated really this 80 hectares of desert land. And I take you to the city location here in black dot, the movement of the sun, summer, spring. It was directly on line with Nowruz, sunrise. And also it viewed Mount Damavand. Do you remember this view of Mount Damavand? Sadly, we can't get it so clearly anymore in Tehran from the school. But on this hill, on these hills, on these desert sort of sandy, gravelly soil, a little village, a little brick village. On the left, the main school. In the center, the water storage, second phase of recreation, etc. And then plentiful abundance of trees and gardens and persimmons and pomegranates. And really, in 1976, it looked like this. So you came up from a gateway, you drove up. This was the gateway. Also, it was the place of the administration. You went in. On axis was the library that I'll speak more about. All around were living places. These were the residential courtyards for the students. And this in the back was the place for all of the case studies, the classrooms. And here was the dining and other facilities. And then in time, in second phase, we built recreation areas. So this really grew from a desert in really less than 3 or 4 years into this blossoming paradise garden. Of course, we were inspired by the whole idea of paradise gardens, so eternal to us, and really the Bagh-E-Fin, Safavid Kashan 17th century creation. What be more beautiful? Very simple. I practice drawing by hand what I appreciate. So this is what I drew in that time of what I thought would be the miniature version drawing of Bagh-E-Fin. You can really, you already know the design of what you'll see. And in time, that is what happened. There is the gateway, there is the water course, there is the center pavilion, which is the library. And I'll explain about these living courtyards, etc. But more important than anything, please pay attention to the abundance of the garden. And I'll explain later on about each tree that we actually picked and why. A model was built, it was presented, and it was accepted and approved in 1970. And really then we went to work. And on opening day, 1972, on the hillock through the gateway, going up to the gateway, looking inward from the gate into the place. And by golly, on opening day in 1972, in September, marched this parade of dignitaries. And I'm sure if you look, you remember all these faces. Who are they? Do you remember them? And there's Habib in full attendance, answering rapid questions, both by the king and the queen. And we watched around, and I again bring to you the bemused face of Habib. I love the mustache. I guess he wanted to become more senior looking. But look at that gaze, and he's looking at the king, who in a sort of quizzical way is looking at this little tree. And probably he was saying, is this the best Harvard can do? But look at this other face, like a mother looking at a baby, saying, one, this will be a magnificent tree. And so the pleasure of presenting the scheme, I bring to your attention one of the faces that you all may not know, but I know. That's my cousin, Bagh-E Mustafi, NIOC board member. The reason he brought me to Iran. He was the person who spotted me out in San Francisco, invited me, coaxed me, and I became, 1964, this NIOC all-company member. Now I want to just share a little bit about natural gravity irrigation from our Bagh-E-Fin. On the highest place, we put water. There were deep wells that gave us water. We stored it, and through channels, it flowed naturally and irrigated everything naturally through these channels. And of course, the symbol of the channel is a wonderful puzzle. Water moves around, goes to the center, comes up, and then moves around in the channels. And when I was talking to you about the trees, I won't belabor everything, but we knew that we wanted to use sarv because the cypress tree is the most meaningful for our gardens. It's the longest lasting. It has the beauty that it self-fertilizes itself. And so the symbol of a self-fertilizing tree here, and this also is a tree on Takht Jamshid, I want you to know. But because we wanted to see greenery, we knew that we would put poplars, we would put Tabrizis. They grew very fast, they died young, while that time the sarv grew into its full height. And the rest were fruit trees, really. This was the plan, and I'll explain details of that as it grew. This is what it looked like, living courts. The walls were living. Bagh-E-Fin is also this way. When you go from the garden into different spaces off of the garden, there are these little courtyards with living, so I call them living walls. And you can see the Tabrizis grew, the sarv grew, and the place became verdant very quickly. Now we're at the gateway. That's through which that parade entered. And in the center of this gateway, we're entering this sort of hashti. And I was fortunate to find Masoud Arabshahi. I said, Masoud, I want you to create big, tall, plaster gateway symbology. And he said, Nader, I want to do the 4 seasons. So this is Masoud's work. As you can see, they begin with the sort of summer and they go all the way to winter. And upstairs on the second floor, really the administration building, all in Kashan brick. And then, you know, Shirazi, Gilims, and everything very much regional. They call this regional adaptation of what is called critical regionalism. This was a type of architecture. It doesn't copy immediately, it adapts, it sees how can it use the past for the present. All right, so as we pass through the gateway, on axis, the garden, the Ladjevardi library. Habib immediately got all the trustees and persons that helped finance it, and he did it the American way. What building do you wish? So he was the first to volunteer. I'll pay for the library. And then he got this person to pay for this classroom, etc. So wonderful participation of many of the leading business merchants of Iran to come to build this building. I want to say more about the library. It looks like this today. And so I'm going to go back to why I was invited to go back and see the school, but that is a story that you'll have to pay a little bit of patience with me. At the center of the library is a great spiral stair that ends in a natural light. And the plan is on the right. It's built on a great socle on a raised platform. It is built as a chartop, and it has a great chrysanthemum fountain at the center. And if you go inside, it looks like this. It has Hajipur Ashraf's woodwork and very nice feeling, very comfortable. It has grown. Book stacks were in the corner, the reading rooms in the center. But now I want to tell you a story. People like Markev Kasarja and Ferdows and others said, Nader, this garden in the evening is beautiful. If we could have a concert. So they arranged an evening piano recital, and carpets were brought, laid around the great pool. And in front of the library, a beautiful baby grand piano, and the lights of the fountain came on. And if you can believe it, there at night, in this beautiful environment, it was a full moon night that we chose. And as the moon rose to its zenith, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata was played. I mean, it was a mesmerizing activity for the students, the faculty, and the guests. And really, I want to just say, the weather, so beautiful in Tehran. That night, I guess we were in the thrill of the night. Two old geezers at that time, young geezers. Barkev said, Nader, I want to spend the night here. And so we borrowed blankets and we slept at the school under this moonlight, just so that we could keep the memory of it longer. But the next morning we had to wake up, people had to go to class. So there was the ICMS classroom, and it was based meticulously on the Harvard Business School model, which was our mandate. But everything on the walls, built in Kashani brick with recess for good acoustic quality. At the center, a skylight. And we used the idea of natural light in all the buildings in the best way that we could possibly do. And that was the plan of it. And there was in full bloom in 1974, case study being done, and the students in unique condition, because the case study brought to Iran the aspect of debate missing in the curriculum and the method of education in Iran at that time, which was all by teaching this, and then you had to answer, etc. No, this said you must study these cases and bring your own thought and share it with the others and debate your point of view. How was this done, though? It wasn't just at the class. It began in the residential courtyard. The plan of the Harvard Business School demands that a 8-person study unit is based. So here we had a bedroom, 2 desks, 2 beds. They shared the washroom, and then the 2 repeated. So you would first study the case by yourself and with your cellmate. And then you would come to the living room and the 8 of you would debate. And that's how you got ready to go the next day to the classroom. Of course, I want to say that the setting out of this geometry is recalling the idea of perfect unity, which is the root of how Iranian architecture is really based. So the idea of a center, of a unity, and then of multiplicity. And it created spaces like this. And it was like this. And in its context, the mountains. So there was this garden, there was a mountain, and there was this sort of shapes. We also picked this shape because I want to say something about the adaptive nature of architecture of Iran. This barrel shape, you can see, it doesn't actually have a lot of heat gain. Because of its shape, the sun's rays are at some point, but then the rest of it is in shade or shadow. So it's a cool shape. And there you are. You enter this ivy-covered Kashani brick environment, recalling Harvard's ivy. And at the center, there's that magnificent magnolia with its aroma and its blossom and its sort of sense of unity and the idea of regeneration. And each room, as you sat at your desk, would view into this center. And there you are in the room. This was a table, a desk, where the picture is taken is where the beds were, natural light, and from the beginning, a natural ventilation as much as we could do, and the shapes of the idea of the roof from above. The same theme carried over into the dining court interior, a fountain, plants, natural light. And Muhammad Naraghi had all of these furniture built, beautiful oak tables, plan of the dining facility. Now we got into people. There's JB teaching in class. There's another professor teaching in class. Rapt attention, because this process means that you're being called on and you've got to be ready. But it doesn't always have to be on the inside. At times they held class in the garden, and there you are, ladies, gentlemen, enthralled by a storyteller. Markev should be telling this story. And then in the evening, because this was intense, 11-month program, 6 days a week. So really, you had a chance in the evening for a break, and the students would go and pick fruit. They would pick apple, they would pick pears, they would pick pomegranates, and they would share it with each other. And they had a wonderful camaraderie with each other. Truly, the 11-month period for these students, for many of them have reported, were some of the most enjoyable in their life. And there they were. I think this was a first graduating class in front of the school. Now, of course, we have probably alumni who are listening. And so if I make a mistake in recalling, you'll all, get me on the right path. And there they were in their regalia with the symbol on their graduation gowns. Now, Harvard brought 3 presidents. These were the major persons who directed the school. The first was Robert Livernash from 72 to 75. Lewis Barnes here, 75, 77. Jim Bowen, I'll show you in the next image. And then, as you know, things began to rapidly change, deteriorate. But fortunately, one of the interim heads, Khosrow, do you hear you there, mashallah, held the reins for about a year. And then the ICMS closed in 1981. I'm told by Iqbal that we have 350 MBA alumni. I hope that that's the right number. And there, there's Khosrow giving this. There's many of the board of trustees, the professors, in full glory now. The teachers in their gowns, beautiful symbol. There's Habib. Habib also taught, I think, from 1975 or so. I think he taught public policy. There's Jim Bauman. There is that J.B. Kasarjan, in a way like the dean, where you had president who ran the school and the dean who sort of did the follow through that this is what we want to be doing here. And then all these wonderful, wonderful, wonderful gentlemen, and you see their names. I think this was the last picture show, 1978. Okay. I didn't return to Iran for obvious reasons. So I only went back in 1996. I actually had accepted a 10-year duty as director of a major architectural firm in Kuwait, and that allowed us to travel to Iran and for Shahla, my wife, to visit with her mom and dad in Tehran. So I had not gone, and I had not gone to the school again. But in 2015, and when we used to come back in 96 from America to give a lecture at Tehran University or one of the schools, one day in the Hilton Hotel, I got a call that there are two gentlemen with a bouquet of flowers who are waiting for you in the lobby. I was surprised. I did not expect who they were. And I went down, and there were two young, stalwart engineers. And they said, Nader Ardalan, it's a pleasure to meet you. We are the current managers of the Imam Sadiq University. And we'd like to invite you to come and see your school. And of course, I was thrilled. Of course, I was also worried. You know, what's going on? But anyway, I went, and I was pleasantly surprised. They had kept the school really in good condition. At least they had kept what I had designed in good condition. Now, this is really not from 2015. This was really from 2019 that they sent me from a drone shop. And you see this wonderful, beautiful sarves, as I had hoped that they would survive, but I guess not all of them. But these guys apparently felt that the front garden would be better if they did not keep all my fruit trees. So the fruit trees are in the backyard, but the front now has become this sort of velvety green, immaculate, and they're very proud of it. And just the fact that they have kept the building so splendidly, I have not objected, although I've grumbled to them that this is not my design. But at night, it's really beautiful. And then there you are, the little village in brick, looking out over the city. And as we leave the garden through the gateway, and we march down that little road to the gateway at the street, it is a pleasant, green, shadowed environment. The students, different predilections probably, but the persimmon tree or the anar tree, still the anar tree. And the brick is still the brick. The place has remained as a little paradise. However, paradise has changed. So at the center is what we had designed, phase 1 and phase 2. But then the school has grown. As you know, phase 1 of development was only 64 units, or for 64 students. The second phase were 128 students. Now the school has grown to more than 1,000 students and still growing. They're anticipating to grow to 5,000. This is not a part of the school, but these are all parts of the school, and they built a mosque in the entryway. Now, in 1989, Habib, we asked on this technical report that Aga Khan had wanted, please write your impressions of the school. And he wrote, at the first reunion of the alumni and faculty since 1979, held recently, the nearly 100 attendees spoke with great fondness for their individual recollection of the ICMS campus. Frankly, it was impossible for them to imagine ICMS without the superb environment that was created for the school by the architect, self-serving. It satisfied both their educational needs and their cultural aesthetic aspirations. Please, this is important. Cultural and aesthetic aspirations. The campus became a symbol for how the best of the East and the West could be integrated. Habib. This was what we first built. This is really what was built later. I must say that the Aga Khan Award said that we cannot judge this building because we can't judge it from what was first built, It's really built by all these additions. So they did not judge this project. I want to say before I close something quickly, what was going on at that time, because many of you may not be aware of what was going on in architectural thinking. The country was growing, country was booming. So we knew that we needed advice from our elders. And in Isfahan, the International Congress of Architects in 1970 was held. But listen to the theme, the interaction of tradition and technology, because this was the push and pull of Iran at the time. A great push toward technology, and I would say a less percentage of people, however, to appreciate where are we from, who are we? And we had really fantastic persons. We had Buckminster Fuller, one of the genius creations and inventors and mathematicians and engineers and architects that existed at the time. The metaphysical best architect at that time of the 20th century America, I would say post-World War II, was Louis I. Kahn from University of Pennsylvania. And I'll tell you something about what he contributed to Iran as I go on. And then in 1974, the same conference with now 40 of the leading lights of the world. And it was called Towards the Quality of Life. We were very interested. We had these dreams, but what is the quality of that life that we want to create for ourselves? Debated. Kenzo Tanka, Japan's great architect, was invited. Jose Luis Sert, who was my dean at Harvard and head of the Congrès International Architecture internationally, was there. And out of this group, we said we must write something about guidance where Iran is going. So from these conferences, a group of us were tapped to research and write Habitat Bill of Rights. What are the rights of your place of living? And we took it from, sponsored by the government of Iran, to first UN Habitat in Vancouver in '76. The book was held up by Margaret Mead, the mother of Barkeb's wife, God love her so, Catherine. People said, this is a great book. This is one of the best contributions that we have had at this Congress. And I want to pay respect for the person who, in many ways, sponsored, encouraged us to do these. The Queen was very much, because as a young student in École des Beaux-Arts, studied architecture for 2 years, she was very much involved that we would go to beautiful places of Iran to showcase our work, and then to talk about these subjects. We had the brilliant, wonderful guidance of the architects, the senior architects of Mohsen Fouroughi and others that you see here, and some young squirts such as myself. I want to say something about now outside of architecture in a way, about some of the tendency that I would call the tendency that hearkened toward our identity. And so a little poem from Sohrab Sepehri. In my heart, there is something like a bush of light, like a morning dream. And I am so restless that I will to run to the end of the plain, to the top of the mountain. There is a voice in the distance that is calling me. The dream of our future. And he would paint these wonderful trees of Kashan. These are the aspects that are also some of the deepest aspects of what we were exploring. Meanwhile, we were doing the Festival of the Arts in Shiraz. We were not being unattentive to our children. We were doing the international films, and I had the pleasure to design and build the Qanun for children in Tehran. But in all the cities, we were revamping, rebuilding are historic traditional buildings such as the Burujerdi house in Kashan. And from Kashan, Haji Ladjevardi, Habib's dad, said, Nader, I want to build, and I want to come out of the bazaar. I want to come into Tehran. I want to build the home offices for Behshar Industries. I said, wonderful, but I'm going to do it as a paradise garden. He said, Befarmoin. So here's what it looks like today. And at the very center, a beautiful spiral fountain that our dear departed Karl Schlemminger designed. This is the first precast concrete industry of Iran that we also brought to Iran in building this and the Saman buildings. So while we were doing things that were of the past memory, we were also bringing new industry to Iran. But at the center, in the auditorium, I brought Arab Shahi back and I said, Masoud, I want another mural. I want it in this plaster. And we agreed that he would do a roof line of the Kashan Bazaar, which helped with the acoustics in the auditorium, but also it brought this beautiful memory of who we are, who we have been. But in Esfahan, we were rebuilding our historic buildings. The Italians, Ismail, were doing the Masjid Jahan, the Naqsh Jahan, all inspired, I would say, by that golden light, that fall of this golden dust that we were trying to grasp, which was our heritage. And on the other hand, we were also propelled to build the modern Iran. So here's the Aryamer Stadium, the sports center where the 1974 Asian Games were held. I helped design it. I did the stadium with Aziz. Meanwhile, Abbas Amanat was doing the Shahiyad. Meanwhile, Tehran was growing from 1 million to 3 million population. Ekbatan and other massive housing were being built, not necessarily cognizant of our Habitat Bill of Rights. There were world international sort of imports being planted in Iran. But still, there were yearnings for brick. So even when we did a high-rise, beautiful brick in concrete structure, or the Teatr Shahr or the Teatr Shahr in Tehran. Meanwhile, Aziz was building the glass agriculture building. And Louis Khan and Kenzo Tange were brought back to Iran, to Abbasabad, to build a new cultural center, a new civic center, a new, in a way, Naqsh Jahan. This was the world that was being sought of. Of course, Khan died in 1974. The work was then given to the English firm. And the idea of Shahistana Pahlavi was being discussed. What was really, however, being discussed was a crisis of identity. We were going through a crisis of Gharb Zadegi, of West toxification versus cultural identity of who we are. This crisis was being debated, and then suddenly an incredible storm wipes all of this clean, all of this off the scene, and we were left with our Shahr Farang. What to do? Where do we go? And so some of us resorted to what had been the meaningful lessons of that time. And for me, it was something like what Maulana wrote, Placeless, a short excerpt of his poem. I am neither Christian nor Jew, neither Magian nor Muslim. I am not from the East or the West, not from land or sea. My place is placeless. My trace is traceless. No body, no soul. I am from the soul of souls. I have chased out duality, lived the two worlds as one. One I seek, one I know, one I see, one I call. Thank you.
یک دنیا ممنون نادر جان. واقعا thank you so much for the nostalgic journey that you took us back to many years ago. واقعا عالی بود. از شهر فرنگ شروع کردی، به شهر فرنگ تموم کردی. درخت ماگنولیا، درختای انار ایران، حتی اون بریکی که از ساختمون ایران با ICMS باقی مونده. میدونم که خیلی افتخار میکنی وقتی که میری میبینی، دسترنج تو، زحمات تو میبینی.
All of us. It was all of us.
All of you.
It is this idea of the unity we felt that created these things. I think that is the lesson to me.
از اقبال جون میخواستم خواهش کنم، اقبال علوی سلطانی. اقبال جون کجا هستین؟ میشه خواهش کنم یک خاطره کوچیکی رو. مرسی اقبال جون، خودتون رو باید آنمیوت کنین.
No message.
No message. I don't. من آقای اقبال رو نمیبینم.
خانم اقبال دارن سن. مرسی. خانم اقبال نازنین، میشه خواهش کنم یه خاطره ای از ICMS، از نادر جان، از حبیب برای ما توضیح بدین؟
خیلی ممنونم که به من لطف کردید، اجازه دادید برام شرکت کنم در این برنامه. دیگه میدونید من خودم هم به ICMS درس خوندم اونجا، هم سابقه ایجادش رو حبیب عزیزم و برادرم برام گفته بودن. از اون برم بعد از اینکه درسم تموم شد، یکی از استادا که استاد مارکتینگ بود اصرار به من کرد که من بمونم ICMS. اونجا اول دیرکتور ادمیشن بودم. Well, sorry, I have to talk in English. I forgot. Well, I started at ICMS as a student, and after that I was hired to be the director of admissions, and then later on director of executive programs and alumni and placement. Placement meant finding companies for the alumni to apply and get a job. So it's a long sort of, it's like love of my life, ICMS. As to Nader's creation, it was a heaven. ICMS was a heaven in Tehran. And I'm not saying it just because I worked there. Everybody loved it. And my children especially enjoyed the pool you had created and the whole sports facility that you had created for the alumni. So during the summer when I was working, my children would come and enjoy it. But the whole ICMS, the classrooms, especially for learning, for discussing, for giving ideas, the setup and the way he had created it. It was just the trees, beautiful. Everything was beautiful, from the people who were there to the architecture, to the trees, as you were saying, and to the students. So that's one. And Habib was wonderful. The idea of, he always used to tell me the idea of ICMS, and I don't want to be boasting, but I would have, he always said it, is that my brother was the advisor to the Minister of Higher Education, and he had the idea of Harvard Business School model there, and they invited him to the French club and then told him that you are the one to do it. And he loved the idea, even though he was scared. And he did such a wonderful job of first hiring advisors from Harvard Business School. He really, from the time I was working with Habib, I had never, ever to this date, see anybody as organized, as thoughtful as Habib. And he was very progressive. I mean, he brought computers to ICMS when nobody knew what was computers. So the combination of wonderful architect and wonderful founder really created a heaven for all of us. And a lot of our alumni really have been successful, and they've done a great, great, great service in Iran and parts of the world, different parts of the world.
Just wanted to thank you for all your effort to get the faculty and the alumni together and made my life much easier. Thank you. How about Mr. Professor Kasarjian? Could we hear a few words from you and your memories of Nader and Habib? We can't hear you. Unfortunately, we can't hear you.
Unmute.
Unmute. We can't hear.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. One of the wonderful things was getting to know Nader, really, from the very beginning. I think he was asked to go and visit some executive education buildings in other universities, like Harvard and Stanford and IMD. And our idea was building something that's entirely Iranian in terms of materials and design. He essentially built this unbelievable garden that imitated the Bagh-E-Fin in Kashan. But the way it connected, which is the paper he and I did at MIT, was that it was the architecture should not just tolerate the pedagogy, it should support the pedagogy. And I think Nader was the perfect architect to understand and implement that. So the Habgas, which were 8-person dormitories, were designed as study groups. Salam Shara Khanum. And the classroom was so beautiful. The brickwork in the classroom acted as a kind of insulation so the sound would not be bounced around. The brick absorbed the sound because there was an ash to the brick on the walls. So I'm just remembering details. In so many ways, the entire architecture supported the pedagogy of the school of what we were trying to accomplish. And I think that was the most remarkable period in my life where I felt that the entire institution was in tune what we were trying to build. And Nader talked about the center, and it was all connected, was very much. Actually, Nader, I don't know if you remember, Habib was my student at Harvard. Way back, yes. And he would keep coming back to Harvard every few months because you can imagine Harvard got many, many schools who tried to involve themselves. But Habib finally succeeded talking me into going to Iran. He had, the remarkable thing about Habib is that he never took a title. In fact, he never called himself a founder. He called himself secretary of the board, which I fully appreciate. He was such a modest man. He was interested in building something as the secretary of the board. Of course, without him, there would have been no school. And by the way, the Shah Nader came in November, because at the time the school opened, they were not sure to come to visit. And the Sawa came and they threw all of us out, and they were sort of 6'6", all of them. I said, you guys should form a basketball team. They didn't think that was very funny. They kicked us out for 24 hours before the dedication ceremony. And the Shah Banu came. And the Shah Banu really Nader appreciated the fruit trees in that first batch of garden, in the upper part of the Hayat. There was apples, there was anar, there was, I think, peach trees, and the cypresses formed I hate to see the new Hayat, which is all flat. It looks like a French cemetery with glass instead of the beautiful live thing that you had created. But I'm glad at least the major buildings are still there. So it was the best 7 years of my life.
Wonderful.
Thank you for sharing it.
Our graduates are all over the world, and they have thrived because they've learned to think for themselves, to make their own decisions, as Nader was talking about it, and they have succeeded in country after country. Very shortly, I'm going to do a tour of the world, stopping to see my past students. I was in Iran from February 1972 to 3rd week of December in 1979.
Thank you.
The fact that I left everything behind is irrelevant, because what I've taken, the memory of the school itself, the architecture, the garden, and all of the wonderful people that came there and graduated. Thank you.
Wonderful. Love you.
How about to hear from Professor Ferdos, Professor Kasrel Ferdos? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Unmute.
Unmute.
Now I understand why everybody is having problem with unmuting, because the host has to unmute us. We can't unmute ourselves. So for the next one, perhaps we can do it.
Thank you.
Nader Jan, I have also been associated with ICMS for many, many years, and I have been mesmerized in the last hour. It's just absolutely incredible. You told me more about it than I remember in 10 years, and about parts that I never really gave it much thought. I just lived it. I was there. It really is a fascinating, incredible story. Since Suhaila Khanum, you want some anecdote, I thought maybe I'll say a couple of things related to what Nader said. First of all, about the source of funding. That was always an interesting question. And Habib mentioned something that I'm not sure if it's true. He said, the first job that I had for ICMS was to be the car salesman. And what he did was selling the cars that had been brought in for the 2,500 years of the Mercedeses. Do you remember those maroon Mercedeses? Because we didn't want to get money directly from the government. And when he said, you need some money, I'll sell these cars. And he sold these cars to everybody that he had. And I don't know how much money he raised. JB, is this true or not? You just nod your head if it's true. And Habib would do things like this. I mean, this is just an example of what he went through. JB was talking about he never took his title. His office, by the way, Nader Jan, you showed my old office. I've been in many of those building places that you see. It just reminded me so much of it. His Habib's office was the worst office. And we would always ask him, why don't you go to a better office? He said, no, no, this is good. It was an L shape. When you walked in, you wouldn't see him. It was not even an office. It was supposed to be a closet or something. You walked in, and then you would have to turn to go to see his desk and to see everything else. He's really an incredible man. I can't talk enough about what Habib does. Maybe the other episode I have to say, because I have to stick with the architectural things. When the students were coming in, the building, you said it was finished in very, very fast schedule. The place was not really ready, and they were supposed to move in and live there. So JB and I were going the night before and cleaning the toilets. I mean, still not really cleaning the toilets, just taking the bricks out and taking the construction material out and so forth. And I remember Khosravani, he was just coming from England. He wanted to tip JB because he thought that, he was one of the people that is working there, because we carried his suitcase and he was cleaning the place. I don't know, JB, you got the tip or not? So I was giving 5 tomans or something like this. Finally, I have to tell you one more thing, if I am allowed to talk maybe for 2 more minutes, 1 more minute. I went back to Iran after 25 years that I hadn't been there. And as you can imagine, in 79, we were the only school that was open, and they had put me in to be the Rais Shura. So anyway, and I had to go and respond to the minister, what are you doing? And he says, what is this case? No, you don't really teach anything by cases. Anyway, we got into arguments. It was a little bit sometimes dangerous to be there, because they would come and say, what is this? A second nest of spies, Harvard, what are you doing in here? Shapur Abdurreza. It was sort of touchy. So when I went back, I still remembered all this. I just want to say this, that it's a long story. One of the professors there knew somebody else, so they invited me to go there. I go there, I felt like the Shah that you showed on that day. As soon as they heard I was a professor here at ICMS, the other professor, their offices now are in the Khabgah, they were not in there. They were in the Khabgah as the offices. You probably saw it too. This is about 10, 12 years ago. And then other people came, all of a sudden there was a group of about 30 people. And then the manager came, or the director, not the big director, but the second person that was running the place. I think the big one was Rokni or somebody like that at the time. Anyway, so they said, he came and said, I've heard this, could I ask you to go around and tell me what this building was like? So we are walking through, and I'm walking with about 30 people behind me, and this guy standing there. So I go and they see they have really, what you were saying is absolutely correct. The guy said, I told them they had written some sha'ar on the entrance, the 4 seasons. They had removed all of them, and he tried to restore them. He said, and he told everybody, you are not supposed to be touching anything that Nader Ardalan has done. Just going around everything, they were really preserving it. They had built a big building outside the courtyard. He said, nobody likes that building. It was one of these new office buildings type classrooms, etc. So everybody likes this old place here. But they had changed the library into something else. I don't know, was it the restaurant or something? I was sort of really sorry to see some of the changes that they had done. And I hadn't seen that yard changed into this grass. It really, I think that must have been terrible because those trees were just incredibly nice. But Nader John, thank you again for this. This is absolutely incredible. And then you also say, I see another one of the professors, Farshad is here too. Farshad is.
He was the next one. I have him on the list. Farshad Jan, good to see you. اگه بشه خواهش کنم خودتو آنمیوت کنی مرتضی جان، اگه لطفاً آنمیوت بکنین.
Okay, now he can do it himself now.
آنمیوت.
I did. No, I did unmute him.
This is Farhad Kashani. You unmuted me probably by mistake. If you meant Farshad Rafi'i.
فرشاد رفیعی.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I mute myself.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Now he can do it himself.
Okay, I am now.
Welcome فرشاد جان. Good to
Thank
see
you
you.
so much. Thank you. This has been an incredible privilege to be part of this group and to listen to this amazing presentation, Nader Jan. Thank you. Really appreciate it so much. I'm a relative, I was a newcomer at ICMS. I was on the faculty for the last 2 years of its life. Incredibly interesting times, and the cohesiveness of the group that was left during those 2 last turbulent years were amazing and really emblematic of the amazing culture that ICMS had. I actually spent 3 summers prior to arriving there as a faculty member in 1978, the summers of 75, 76, and 77, as I was working on my doctoral dissertation during the summers at ICMS, and at the same time falling in love with the place, the architecture, the faculty, the colleagues, Iqbal Jun, and the students. So it's been an amazing privilege for me to have been involved with this incredible experience. I have to say that I love all of you, but for me, Habib has an incredible and special place in my heart and in my mind. He's the one who recruited me to ICMS. I was planning to just go out into the real world after getting my MBA at Harvard, but he convinced me to give it a try, and I'm eternally grateful to him for having done that. I am grateful to him, not just because of the professional experience that he made possible for me and the incredible friendships that came out of that. But I got something out of ICMS that few people did, and that is a life partner who's standing behind me, Farid Rafi, who, as some of you know, was my student at ICMS during the first year. Even though I must have been the worst possible teacher during that first semester, as I was struggling to learn what the hell it was that I was teaching.
It was horrible.
But despite that, at the end of the year, she still accepted me. So I'm grateful for that. So I just want to sum up, love you all. It's been, as I think JB also said, this is our orchestra, an incredible life experience that Habib, Nader, and all of you made possible. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and sharing your thoughts. Nader Jan, there's a question. Can you please talk about Abdulali Farman's role in this project?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that possibly Iqbal or JB would be able to say more about that, except that I know he invited Habib to the French club, Club Français, and proposed that Habib be the person to take on the mandate from the ministry to go to Harvard and get this project put together. Of course, the Farang group as a whole had very much to do with this project in many ways. First, for 6 years, I was a partner of Aziz Farang. And so, I have to say you one thing. You may not know, but in 1970, when I got this commission, I had come back from another of my trips to the villages of Iran, and I had unfortunately gotten jaundice, yarghan. And so I was unable to go to my office, and I had to stay in bed for 4 months. And so a table I designed was brought to my bed, and I designed this school sitting in bed with jaundice. And I would then, in the evening, when I had finished my sketches, a draftsman would come and take it, and in Aziz's office, they would draw my work. And 2 or 3 people really were very helpful in that office. One was Yahya Fuzi, who had a wonderful sense of geometry. And I think actually also, if I'm not mistaken, Farhad Zahidi was also in our office, in Aziz's office. So these groups of people were drawing what I was designing, and that is how this thing came about. So it's a sort of a miraculous story, I would say. Can I tell you one funny story?
Sure, a
Because
quick one.
we're running into the evening. We're going to have the moonrise and the piano and the
One-line sonata is playing.
But I want to tell you about, because Barkev reminded me of the night, and so did Kasra. The evening before the inauguration and the dignitaries would come, I went to the garden to see if everything was ready. And I noticed that there were 2 things missing. Yes, we had put red fish into the jube and into the pool so that the classic of the little red fish would be there. But I noticed that in our classic gardens, you would also have birds. You would have ducks, and we didn't have any ducks. So I ran that evening to the south of Tehran, where they would sell ducks. And of course, there's another story here. I and my family are hunters, and we would go hunting. And whenever we found nothing, we would definitely make a stop at the bazaar in South Tehran to buy ducks or other things to show what we had shot. But anyways, I knew that a place that would sell live ducks. So I brought, I don't know, a half dozen ducks, mallards and others, to the garden that night. And I put them in the garden, and I felt so happy that now the whole picture was ready. And I went home and I went to bed. Early that morning, because the inauguration was also very early, I don't know, 6 o'clock, something gnawing, something was very disturbing in my mind. And it said to me, Nader, go to the garden, take a look at the garden to see if everything is okay. So I go in, there's nobody there, and I'm looking around, it looks beautiful, everything is ready, but there's something funny. There are these ducks, and they're larger, fatter, and they're waddling, they're sort of doing this. And then I looked into the water, and there's no fish. Of course, the damn ducks had eaten all the fish. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Anyway, so the stories go on.
Merci. There's a question that it's whether ICMS is related to IBS, New Iranian Business School.
No, ISU? No.
Thank
I
you.
think that, as I understand it, to be politically correct, ISU really trains mainly the people who go to the Iranian Foreign Ministry. So they have a complete Islamic school. But I want to say to you, they actually asked me to come and give a lecture to them about what I did with you here tonight. And they brought all their professors. And I think Kani was the person who was in charge of the school, from the hierarchy of mullahs. And he loved the idea that this school was based on the madrasa. And so I never knew any of this. But when I went to give this talk, that's the stories these people told to me. And in any case, I was very happy that something very traditional satisfied both something very contemporary. We have not learned that lesson. Even when after the revolution, what they did is they took this idea of our tradition and then they went and copied exactly. That is not what the lesson was. The lesson was to use our tradition, use our foundations of design, of thinking, but not to repeat it immediately. And so all the embassies of Iran built after the revolution immediately were a copy of, Esfahan or this, etc., but immediate copies. That is not the intention. The intention was to learn our lessons and to use our material, but really build something new, a new creation. Khalq jadid. So that's my last contribution. There are many people we have to thank. I'm sure that we have not done adequate job for everyone.
Merci, thank you. من میخوام باز کنم past alumni. هر کی دوست داره صحبتی بکنه by raising your hand on the Zoom, on the chat bar. Who would like to take a question or comment?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah.
Davar John, did you raise your hand? No. Professor Kasarjian, can you unmute him, please?
Okay. You asked a question, Sohaila John, about Abdullahi Farman. He played an extremely important role for the school that most people are not aware of. He was the only member of the board who insisted on making the school residential. So all the Khabgahs, Nader Jun, would not have existed if the decision had not been made to make ICMS a residential school. And I think the result would have been totally different for the students, for the culture of the place, and for the quality of our graduates. It was Abdullahi who insisted on boarding, having boarding students, including married people. They had to come by themselves and live there. And I'll make one other comment, then shut up. We met, Habib invited Abdullahi and Guguli to dinner with my wife and myself in Cambridge as part of his plan to get me to come to Iran. And at the end of dinner, we drove them to their hotel. And they fit in the back of my Porsche, which was very crowded. We dropped them off. My wife and I looked at each other and said, if people in Iran are like Abdullahi and Guguli, maybe you should go to Iran.
Wonderful.
Merci. Farshad Kashani, I think you have a question. Can you unmute him, please?
Yes.
Okay, this is the first time I'm meeting Mr. Ardalan. Nice meeting you, and you did a fantastic job. I always had heard your name, but never met you until now. I thank you for what you did to ICMS, or for ICMS. I have one question and one comment. The question is, did you pick the Kashan architecture or Fin's architecture because of Habib being from Kashan? or that was just a different story. The second thing is, one thing I always tell people about ICMS and the culture of before revolution compared to after revolution is, as we know, these days, everything is party-bazi in Iran. Now, before revolution, I graduated in 1975 from Pahlavi University. And here I am, a cousin of Habib Ladjevardi. Habib is my pesaramme, I am his pesardoi. And I think if I want to go to ICMS, it's going to be a piece of cake. I take the test, the GMAT test. In the middle of the test, I feel nauseated. I leave the classroom, go out, go to Minu restaurant, have a biscuit. By the time I come back, I've lost 1 hour. So my GMAT score was low. I don't remember how low, but it was low. So I got a letter in mail that says you have been rejected. So that's it. And I thought that's not fair. You know, I'm a cousin of the founder. I'm not rejected. So what I do is, there was a wedding party just around that time frame. I go reach Habib and says, hey, Habib Jun, you know, I was rejected because I took this GMAT test and my score was low because of this and that. And Kamran is the witness. My other cousin, Kamran Kashani, is a witness that, you know, I was throwing up. I had to leave the classroom. And he said, okay, listen, you know, in this school, you need experience and you have no experience at all. I think if you go do your military service, and by the time he said that, I thought he's going to finish the sentence by saying, then you can come back and we'll accept you. But that's not how the sentence finished. He said, if you go and do your military service, you can take the test again, and I'm sure you're going to get a higher score, and your chances will be much higher. So this is what party-bazi was before revolution, whereas these days, just knowing someone, cousin of your cousin, will take you to a lot of high places. I shut up here. I just want to hear your answer on that Kashan idea with the ICMS design. Thank you.
Let me just answer. Farajun, thank you. Wonderful question. I believe you're absolutely right. I could have picked, I'm a Kurd, I could have picked Sanandaj or Esfahan or Shiraz, but Kashan was really nearby. And we had the opportunity of not only the fantastic architecture that we could use, but Bagh-E-Fin is nearby. And therefore the proximity and the fact that the Ladjevardis were from there, and probably an easier sell to use that, is how we made that decision. But it is really, I want to say, I have spent more time in Kashan than probably almost as much as in Esfahan, because we drew all the bazaar of Kashan. We drew these buildings. And so we learned a lot from Kashan there. And I think that's really the main reason. The story of the party-bazi, I have a question, and maybe JB or Iqbal could answer. If we had 64 people, students in the first few years, and then after, I think, 2 years, we had expanded to 128, and this school existed until 1979, that should give us a total number of students in that ICMS, that would be 800 or some 100 people. How is it that we only have 350 alumni? Please answer this question. JB.
خانم under Amir Sultani, if you can unmute, please.
Okay. One more.
No.
Merci.
Go ahead.
Okay. I want to apologize. As I'm getting older, my memory doesn't work very well. So you are right. I think probably we were about 500. And the only thing I did is I just took the years and multiplied it by about 40, 45, and I gave the number. So I do apologize, but JB can make it clear. I'm sorry.
We love you. It's fine. We understand. Thank you.
Can I just add a word, Nader Jan? I'm Amir Soltani Iqbal's son,
Ooh.
and we grew up in ICMS as children. And so when my mom speaks of the pool or the gardens or the forests next to it,
Or the
dining room where we would just go and we'd just say Iqbal Alavi and we could have as much ice cream as we wanted. To me, to us, ICMS, the enclosed garden, it wasn't just, it was the safest place in the world. And what it gave me as a kid was in fact your friendships. So after the revolution and the power of those friendships, so after the revolution, when we came to Boston, it was because of the ICMS connection to Harvard. And then we had the protection truly of Habib, of Farshad, of AJB, of these friendships. So Nader Jun, you not only created the most ecstatic architecture, you gave us children a family that has lasted for us for decades. And the love for Iran that's never diminished. And so within those walls, you gave birth to a family, Nader. It was a womb. It was a womb.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Wow.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said, Amir Jan. Thank you.
He's right. You know, we are connected with the alumni. We are all as a family.
I have a raised hand for a long time. There's a question by Ladan Khamsi Malihi, about the National Library that you built. Can you unmute Ladan Khamsi, please?
Unmute.
Unmute. You have to do it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yes, I'm not unmuted.
Can you please lower your hand too? Your hand is raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Oh,
Merci,
hold on. Let me ask my question, then I'll do it. Okay, how's that? So thank you, Nader Jan. It was great. I went to pick up Farhad coming from Tehran, actually. So I listened to the first part of your presentation at Logan, and then I tuned in again when I got home. So, you know, it was so interesting, I couldn't let go. But it was fascinating, and I not only learned, but I journeyed in Iran. It was beautiful. My question is about the National Library in Tehran. And the reason I'm interested in it is because although I'm not associated with ICMS, at the time, when I went back to Iran, I was working at the Pahlavi Library. And the project for the National Library was something that was initially started there. There was a contest, someone, you know, there was a bid for all the designs and whatever. And I was part of the group that was conducting the contest, whatever. And then, of course, the revolution happened, and we knew where it was going to be, but it never happened yet. And then years later, when I went back to Iran in the early 2000s, lo and behold, there was a national library on, you know, on a top of a hill, on one of the highways, new highways. Did you guys have anything to do with that? I'm sorry, if I missed it when I was driving from Logan, I may have missed it, but tell me about that.
I'd be happy to quickly go over. Actually, for the Pahlavi National Library, the largest at that time international design competition was held.
Yes.
And as you remember, we actually had about 600 entries.
That's
from
right.
all over the world.
Yes.
I was chosen to be the president of the design jury. And we had really incredible international jurors, leading architects from America, from Mexico, from Japan, and Europe. We chose one. The revolution occurred. Therefore, that was not built. And then much later, another competition after the revolution was held in Iran, and an Iranian architect, nothing that I had anything to do with, was selected and built. So that's the story.
Does it answer your question, Ladanjan? Okay, we take two more questions. One is from my other half, Bahram Shafai. Can you unmute him, please? Can you unmute him, please? Bahram, you have to unmute yourself too.
Yeah, I did. I did.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, hello. This is Bahram.
June, hi.
I have, I just wanted to share something, and I want to know whether, what is your opinion about that? As you know, I'm writing papers. I'm in the educational domain in the different area like electrical engineering. And when I write papers and so forth about some things that I think it is correct, I always believe about one statement, which is called imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagination is more important than knowledge. And I really believe in this in my field of study. I just wanted to know, in your experience that you had all these wonderful things that you have done, what can you describe about imaginations versus knowledge that you have? So which one dominated one or the other? Just can you explain a little bit about that?
That's, of course, what they call in America a setup, but I'd be happy to play the game. I think that Einstein said that intuition is greater than knowledge also.
That's right.
I truly believe that intuition is the root of that imagination. In our tradition that I have searched to find, I think your intuition is what gives you your sense of validity, your sense of truth. That, unfortunately, has been cast aside by the Descartesian material determinism of I think, therefore I am. And so really we're in a world where that level of imagination and your intuition, which is, I think, a very strongly rooted aspect of Persian culture, it has been eliminated from much of the attitude to culture. So I'm so glad that you asked this. I believe that today, when I'm now talking with other people, when we're imagining what we would be building in 2050, when Biden is now taking America, hopefully, into a domain of climate consciousness, of equity, of social justice. I mean, the world is potentially poised, Bahram, for another worldview. I believe that in that other worldview that you have asked about is the world that we Iranians can really contribute to, because our world is made of this intuition of the right path. You know, it is born in us. We're all poetically driven. And when we go to our poetry, whether it's Maulana or it's Hafiz or it's Saadi or it's Khayyam, all of these have this inspirational, mystical aspect. That aspect of mystical aspect has been so downplayed. And I want to tell you, I struggled when I wrote this book, Sense of Unity, as to whether people said, Nader, you must call it the sense of unity the Islamic tradition in Persian architecture. And to be honestly, I felt it was more true to call it Sufi tradition, because it is really through Maulana, who I think is the inspiration for someone like me. When I design, although I speak in English, although I've read Maulana in English, because, you know, I've had no Farsi education. And so I know my culture as a Farangi, but I think I've touched part of it. And it's really through Maulana, through how he taught me to think and trust my mystical aspect. And I believe that this mystical aspect, intuition and imagination, characterizes very much of Persian art and poetry and really our culture. Let's try to believe in that, because we are ambassadors now scattered throughout the world. Thank God many of us are doing well. You know, it's not that we're poor immigrant. No, doing well. And in this contribution, believe that that mystical, intuitive aspect of our culture is what we can bring in this new world that is being created, which is deeply involved with, first of all, we believe that we are not beyond nature. We're not to dominate nature. We believe that we're a part of nature. We're a species of nature. This is a part of this new realization of this new culture of climate reality. We're not to dominate nature, which is a Western idea, you know, that man must dominate nature. No. We're vicegerents of nature. So I think that if you look at the deep roots of Iranian culture, we could be very valid in this new world that is being created. Thank you, dearest, for asking the question.
Thank you very much for
It was
describing.
beautifully answered. Thank you. The last question is from my dear friend Murtaza Tayerani. He's as I mentioned, he's a civil engineer, and he has a good one for you.
Yeah, I hope so. My question is about the construction of ICMS. Being in construction and design, most of the time the contractor is not able to deliver what is in design. Did you run into any problem in construction? And also, what kind of material you use? Any steel, concrete, or precast?
Yes, thank you for, this is very important, because our reality is made of material things. But may I say something to you? One of the great architects of America, Louis Kahn, that I mentioned, says the following: great architecture is born in your dream. It's realized through your design and through its construction. But once completed, it must also bring back the dream. You know, this is a circular thing. Material things must also be inspiring. And so I felt very much that to use the brick, the handmade brick, and particularly because Kashan was nearby, and really we could have access. This was important, that the handmade, not machine made, was brought into the building. We really use load-bearing brick. All the walls bear the weight in all the khabgahs. Where we have larger span, like the library, we use cast-in-place concrete. And then the amount of difficulty, if you had asked about the contractors. Well, I think I want to tell you something. Shaigan Company was the first contractor on board. And our wonderful, still alive and kicking friend and philosopher I spoke with him. I said, I want this building to be built very traditionally. And Shaigan Dariush helped with that. Once we did that, and the first phase was so successful, this idea that you could build with natural Iranian materials was very easy for the second phase. Fortunate that I had my cousin, Nader Ardalan and Qadimi, who bid and won that, but they were already into the mode that it's okay to build using traditional materials. So there was no problem. And this is Zare Grigoryan, who died only a few years ago. I mean, here's a first structural engineer, Iranian graduate of Harvard University, who no longer has that field. They no longer graduate structural engineers from Harvard. But he has designed with me almost everything that I have built in Iran. So when we built with precast concrete, post-tension concrete, Zare was the man. So he did both traditional and he did very advanced.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci. So with this note, I want to close the session for the seminar, Nader Ardalan, Nader Jan seminar. I just have a message from Max and Leila Ladjevardi. They're on with us tonight, and they send a message. Thank you, everyone, for all these wonderful memories about our father. ICMS was the love of his life, and he loved all of you like his extended family. Leila, Max, thank you for being here. Also, Davar and Mani, thank you for being here, supportive as always to your dad. And not only you are proud, the whole community, Iranian community, and I'm sure the world, the international world, that they admire what your father had done. And I truly, truly thank you for what you have done to keep our culture alive. And oh, Max, you opened your video. I'm so glad. Nader Jan, Varan, thank you so much for giving your time and sharing your beautiful memories of our beautiful country. Thank you again. Thank you everyone for participating, and thanks to Kanun Iranian for organizing this event.
Absolutely. Thank you, Darren. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Merci. Shabetun bekhair. Good night, everyone. This was like a family reunion, wasn't it?
Right. Good night, dear.
Shab bekhair.
Good night.